Hello and welcome to Elevate Me number 3. Today we're starting off with a Grandmaster Zenyatta clip, and it's a really interesting one. So we're on defense, point A, Eichenwald, and this Zen has two main options, which we're going to break down in a moment. First, I want to talk about team compositions. So, and sorry, the quality's not so great, but the enemy team is running a Pharah, and that's Pharah right there. Now, Pharah excels into anchor tanks like Reinhardt and Orisa. The reason being that she can really manipulate her opponent's movements very well. So, for example, let's say, she's throwing rockets and your team decides to kind of bunch up around this little space behind the barrier. Now, maybe that sounds great at first, but obviously if your team clumps up in this tiny little space here, that's bad news. Sure, Pharah might not be able to do a whole lot of damage to you, but if their team dives you or they just push forward, it's going to be really easy for them to engage because of how tightly bunched up your team is. The other option is for the team to scatter and start falling backwards, which is great for Pharah because then she can start chucking rockets over the shield because she has that elevation advantage. And then the moment your team starts scattering, if your team isn't coordinated, then they're just going to pick you apart one by one. Positioning is going to start to fall apart, which is actually kind of what happens in this clip. So let's get it going. Oh, actually, sorry, I want to talk about one more thing, which is Tracer. You're going to see the enemy Tracer flank around the right side. She's going to go this way, and that'll come up in a moment too. Okay, so let's start this clip. So this Zen just starts poking. There was the Tracer we just saw. Now the quality wasn't so great, but it looks like she used 2 blinks, which again I'm going to talk about in a moment. So let's watch what this Zen does. So he's just kind of throwing orbs and not really hitting anything because the opponents are doing really well to not show themselves. Okay, now he's looking, oh, that was weird. YouTube kind of messed up on me. So let's go back a little bit. So right here, this Zen's kind of looking for this Tracer, but doesn't quite find it. And now this Zen goes into this tower and isn't doing a whole lot for the team. Now, at this point, I want to talk about what those 2 options were for this Zen player. Option 1 was to go protect that flank and ward off that Tracer. Now, I wouldn't recommend that kind of play, but because we saw the Tracer use 2 blinks, this Zen actually, with so much support nearby, like the Mercy and the tanks, the Zen could have gone towards the cart, use that as cover, and then start to ward off and protect that flank for his team. And again, I wouldn't really recommend Zenyatta's to kind of do that kind of play, but given the circumstances and the fact that a lot of blinks were used for that Tracer to get into position, this Zen could have put in a lot of work to make sure that Tracer, to restrict the space that Tracer had. Now, to be honest, that's probably the not as good option. I think the better option is to actually fight the rest of the team head on, to play main. The reason being that this Pharah just killed the enemy Pharah. So now this Zenyatta has tons of room to work in and can start pressing with the rest of the team. Now, those are, in my opinion, the 2 best options. Instead, this Zen kind of went for something in the middle and really restricted the kind of space that he had to work in, and then just drastically reduces how effective he could be. So let's kind of watch how this plays out. Throwing some harmonies, yeah, that's great, but not offering a whole lot else. Like, you're just kind of stuck in here. And right there, by the way, I would have liked to see he gives a harmony to Mercy, and at that same moment I would have liked to see, just after that harmony, I would have liked to see him discord this Tracer just as a small thing. And yeah, sorry, you can't tell that's Tracer, but Tracer's right there. Cool. So as you can, and then now matters are really bad because now you have your back, this Zen player has his back turned to his opponents, and now he's dueling this Tracer, whereas if he had done what I recommended earlier and kind of gone for a more wide approach, like, well, actually, this angle's not very good. Let's see if we can find a better one. Let's go back a bit. Oh, right here. This is good. If he had gone for a more wide approach, he could start to go this way. Obviously, not on the second floor, like here. Play from this side, and then he doesn't have his back turned to his opponents, and he can still duel that Tracer while being close to his teammates. So yeah, so kind of push this way. So instead, he's kind of sandwiched himself, and that's obviously just not a good place to be in. Thankfully, he had support from Mercy to help with this duel, which you'll see in a moment. He's going to get healed up a bit. There it is. And And it's not so bad, but this Zen is consuming a lot of resources and not killing this Tracer. So basically, what this mostly comes down to is just a lack of positioning, correct positioning, and I would say positioning awareness. The first mistake was going into that clock tower. I would have liked to see Zen either kind of. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about what this Zen could have done. So option 1 was to go and flank, and to protect that flank against Tracer after she used those blinks. He should have done that around the cart and basically go kind of like this way. Instead, he kind of went, through this clock tower and pushed this way and sandwiched himself. That's not good. So that would have been option 1, which is kind of what he did. But again, it felt like he was wishy-washy and just kind of stayed in here for a while. Didn't really know which way to go, and that's obviously not good. Option 2 would have been to play main and, keep poking the main forces, especially after that Pharah got killed. So in order to do that, he probably would have played this corner right here and then, chucked orbs from there. Otherwise, there's that kind of door behind him that he could have played that corner as well. So that's generally how I would have played it. One of those two. Yeah, so this, I'm not sure if we finished this clip, but it ends poorly. Doesn't eventually get the Tracer, and then just dies. Yeah, and they lose the point. So yeah, cool. So I hope that was interesting. At this level of play, positioning is so critical, whereas at lower levels of play, you can just kind of outskill everyone with just, just really good aim. But at Grandmaster level, you need the aim and you need the positioning. All right, let's jump to Soldier. Okay, so this one also actually comes down to positioning quite a bit. And that's like I just mentioned right now, because the aim's not quite there at this level. This is a gold player. Unfortunately, sometimes I'll see I've done reviews for like gold, like McCree's and soldiers, and their aim is actually phenomenal. This player I would say is roughly gold level in terms of aim, but when it comes to VOD reviews, obviously positioning is much easier to critique and to kind of explain how you could do it better, whereas aim, a lot of times, it just takes a lot of practice. Okay, enough chit chat. So for this Soldier, I would have liked to see him play up here. It's a great spot for Soldier, especially in solo queue. You have so much control over there. You can go into this room right here if need be for that health pack and to kind of protect that flank, although generally that's not what you want to do. Generally, you either want to push forward if the fight's going well, or fall back if the fight's going poorly. Generally speaking, there's obviously much more. It's much more than that, but that's kind of the basic idea. And a lot of times you're just gonna literally stay up here and just pressure, especially when you're against a Pharah. And you set up a nice crossfire because your team was over here to the left, and if you had been up here, this would have gone really well. And the idea is that if their team decides to start pressing you, then you can fall back, and then your team wraps around this way, and you kind of trap them, and that's great, because then they come in from this side. Once you've fallen back, either to the first floor or on the second floor, depends on the circumstances. Then once you're kind of over there repositioned, then you can start facing this way again, and your team's over here, and you sandwich them. So that's kind of the idea. All right. So instead, what we're gonna see in this clip is a lot of like 360 movement from this Soldier. We're gonna see, I think, once or twice where he puts himself in a position where he's literally surrounded by opponents, and at that position, at that point as Soldier, that's not where you want to be, right? You want to be behind your tanks, have a lot of field of vision and just shooting in one general direction. You don't want to have to be doing a lot of turning. Okay. Cool. So this starts off okay, but as you can see, your team's really bunched up, and you're running a triple tank with McCree, Soldier, and Mercy, so just a single healer. So you don't really want to exhaust your Mercy, which we're gonna actually see a little bit of that too. So this whole time, you're doing pretty decent damage, but you actually would have been just fine being in that spot that I mentioned earlier. The fall off for Soldier isn't that bad actually at this distance. Okay. So you're pressing, and then now soon, eventually, this is where we're gonna start to see some problems. So again, your team's really bunched up, and you're not really helping that problem. You're just kind of making it worse. So right here, this is where it starts. So right now, all of your all of your tanks are to the right, and you manage to put yourself in front of all of them, and you're kind of stuck here for a few seconds. Now, this is bad for a number of reasons. The first reason is you're gonna exhaust your team's resources. DM you can see on the right, Healing from Mercy. If I'm correct, I think you also burn your heal pad. Whereas, and not to mention that, you know, you're going to be doing a lot of this, right? You're going to be doing a lot of turning. If you had been in a more safe position, like on high ground in the back more, you could have been pumping out damage while also not exhausting resources from your team, from your teammates. Excuse me, from your teammates. Cool. So let's play this. So you can see you're taking a lot of damage from the left. And this is the 360 situation I was talking about, where you're having to turn around a lot. And notice this entire time you never looked at Pharah. Pharah's just been roaming free. Actually, I think McCree killed her earlier, if I'm not mistaken. But you haven't really contributed a lot to that. Now, this is the first time you actually looked at Pharah. She ducks away. And again, you push forward kind of as a frontliner, and you take a lot of damage. Now, here's the problem, is that your Mercy had to burn Valk first, and that's pretty much a red flag that you lost the team fight. They Valked, sorry, your team Valked, and then their Mercy is going to come with the counter Valk, and typically speaking, especially at this level, the team that Valk second is going to win. And yeah, even though you had Tac Visor, it just wasn't enough. They just got more value out of their ultimates. So again, this entire fight, this, like, you know, minute and a half long amount of fighting goes way better if you could position yourself like we talked about up here. Whoops. Oh, sorry, I'm not used to this website. Oh, okay, there we go. Up here. This entire time, if you'd just been up there, yes, there's a good chance they would have put a lot of resources to get you off that high ground, but that's great. If they're expending all those resources, you back off and your team can set up a trap. Whereas you were quite ineffective being just bunched up with your team. You want to set up that crossfire. You want to manipulate your opponent's movements, as opposed to you kind of got manipulated by your opponents, and you just did a lot of running around, you know, didn't focus enough on that Pharah, etc., etc. I think that all makes sense. So let's jump into the next clip. Whoops. Oh no, that's not what I want. Sorry about that. Okay, Widow. This is a pretty simple one. I didn't have a lot of feedback for this Widow just because played it pretty well. I did a Widow, that was a great shot. I did a Widow review a couple weeks ago, and similar concepts. Reloading far too frequently. First example, right here, you kill this tire, you have 27 bullets, and you decide to reload with this Winston right in front of you. So that's kind of awkward. This whole time you could have been shooting him, and it really takes a lot of time for this player to kind of reorient and like start shooting that Winston. Whereas at a high level, rather a higher level Widow, immediately would have seen that Winston, not reloaded, and just gone for a headshot. Worst case, the Winston dives you, or dives you and uses a bubble and uses all those resources, and that's great. Then you grapple away. But instead, all this Widow got out of it was just, I believe, just a jump. I think, let's go back and just verify. Does he jump you? I believe he does. Yeah, there's, no, he actually doesn't jump you. Yeah, so that was actually very smart of this Widow, or sorry, of this Winston. So if this Widow had not reloaded, puts more damage onto that Winston, guaranteed he's either forced to jump on you, jump away, burn a bubble, something, as opposed to him just getting to walk up to you for free. Then you grapple, and then he chases you. And you missed a grapple right there. So there's the chase. He just went to jump you. So that's actually, at a high level, that kind of mistake is gonna cost you your life. So be very, very careful of doing stuff like that. Don't feel like you always have to be reloading. Cool. Let's move on to the next reload example. Similar concept. Right here you're at, let's see, what is that? 24 bullets, and then you reload. Not necessary. That's 24 bullets is plenty of bullets for a fight. And I want to contrast that to earlier, when you actually had a lull in the fight, which was the perfect time to reload, which is generally about right about here. A fight's ending, and you have all this time to reload, and not a peep, and you're at 18 bullets. So this would have been a perfect time to reload. So hopefully I've kind of shown you the differences of when you should and shouldn't reload. Look for those lulls in a fight. That's when you want to reload. If you're mid-fight, if there's a target in front of you, and you have more than, say, 20 bullets as Widow, probably don't want to reload. Yeah, cool. Let's talk about positioning. So right here, I thought about this for a while, and I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this positioning you have here, because on the one hand, you have great sight lines. You can actually see into these like corridors a little bit, and that's nice. But what you're sacrificing is two things. First is you're really close to your opponents, which is bad for two reasons. You're gonna have to move your camera around a lot. And, you know, obviously as a sniper, being close to your opponents doesn't really make sense. That's obviously a lot harder than when you're kind of mid to far range. And the second reason is that you're prone to a dive or a flank. Right here to your right, on this side of you over here, you're actually you're actually vulnerable to a flank. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually stairs that they can just walk up to and just come to you, like a, you know, Reaper or a Genji potentially. Not to mention, this distance from these doors over here, or even the other side, you can just get dove straight up from a leap, or, you know, if a Genji comes out with a dragon blade, you have to be very, very, very careful. So it's kind of a 50-50. I think in general, I would prefer you just to be way back, even if you don't have a high ground position, because you're gonna have so much control and you're just gonna have so much like suppressing fire that the enemies, they're just never gonna be able to deal with you. And if they're on your front line and you're back there just shooting away for free, that's great as Widow. So that being said, I like these sight lines. So if your shots are just on point and you're just doing like a really sick job, then it doesn't bother me so much. But in general, I prefer the safe play here, especially since you have so many people up, and it's on you guys to throw, and it's going to be really hard for your opponents to come back from this. So I prefer the safer play. But that being said, you had some great shots here, and it was awesome. You were hard carrying there, so good job. Last thing I want to mention is the concept of focus fire. So right here, this is earlier, this Winston dove your team, and I loved that you threw a shot onto his barrier right there. I'm not sure if that was intentional. You might have just actually like lagged, or not lagged, but you know, ping can be an issue sometimes, and you kind of like shoot him as the barrier come up. So again, I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but if it was intentional, then I love it. However, you kind of look away from this barrier, and in this kind of situation, as you can see, no one's in line of sight yet. Don't be afraid, and this is something that really high-level players and professional players are really good at, is that when they call a target, everyone looks at that target and they burn them down instantly, right? That's focus fire. It's a concept as old as time, as old as video games. You really want to make sure that Winston goes down. You never know if he has that, you know, that primal rage ready. If you guys can just burn him faster than he's ready to pop that primal rage, then that's great. And, you know, even high-level players still make that mistake as a Winston. They don't expect to get burned down so fast, and they don't get to use their primal rage. So I like that you hit that barrier. Would have liked to see you actually finish it off and help your teammates kill that Winston. Yeah. So, you know, even as Widow, if you can just contribute some left clicks, and it doesn't have to be a sniping shot. It can actually just be, you know, some unscoped shots, and that would have been just fine. All right. Cool. Let's move on to the last video, which is a Winston. Now, I believe this was a scrim. I don't have a whole lot to say, but I have something very important to mention, because I believe this person just asked me to analyze this dive, or this engagement rather. Well, it was a dive. Now, I love the patience. I love that you guys, it sounded like you guys had a play in mind and you were setting up for it, and that's great. But you had an opportunity and you guys didn't see it, which is right here. Excuse me. So a few months ago, I made a video called What is Space? And it really talked about this idea of you don't have to always go from where you are to your opponents are. You can kind of do this leapfrog thing where you claim space slowly, and then eventually you kind of checkmate your opponents, because they kind of put themselves in a corner, and then you go for the dive. And that's exactly what happened here. You guys very elegantly claimed this left side. You kind of zigzagged through the stairs, you went around, you came here, and then you had one more step which you guys skipped, and that's what cost you this engagement. So what was that step? All right, so you go here, right here, this step. If you guys could have all repositioned yourself right here in front of hotel, then the next engagement goes so much smoother. So let's break it down. You wait for your cooldowns. 3, 2, 1. You know that they have a bastion. Right here. Look at this. Look at how your opponent's repositioned. They clumped up hard into this corner. The next step. Oops, sorry. The next step is to literally just have your teammates get right here. And then again, like you just did, wait for the cooldowns to come up, the leap, the boosters from D.Va, etc., whatever you need. Heck, if you want to get a little bit fancy, you can send someone up here. And then once everyone has their cooldowns ready, this is the easiest dive of your life. This is so easy. So you guys, so basically the takeaway here is you shortcutted this, and you just get melted. No one can reach the bastion. Looks like you guys actually didn't even dive at the same time, and that's it. That's pretty much all she wrote. So again, you're doing that leapfrog. You're claiming space. You're claiming space. You're claiming space, and then don't rush it. Just wait for your opponents to put themselves in a bad position. Once you see that, get right next to them as close as you can, then go for that nice, quick, short dive. Because that distance that you dove was just too far. Plain and simple. It was too much distance to cover in one dive. You want to look for those short dives where you have, environment to protect you. Okay, cool. I hope this video was helpful. If you liked it, please like the video and please subscribe. Thank you.